Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 3rd edition of the St. Louis County Board. Paul, would you please take the roll? And would you do it slowly, because Commissioner Rocker needs just a minute or two, and I suffer from a similar problem that he has, and I will tell you that it may take him all of those 2 or 3 minutes to get here, please.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Present.
Commissioner Dahlberg.
Here.
Commissioner Forsman.
Here.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson. Not slow enough, huh? Commissioner Rocker. He's around. Commissioner Fink. Chair. Yes.
Present. Commissioner Rocker is in the building, and he will be here momentarily. And I am aware of the challenges that face him, for he and I have a similar problem. When it gets really, really, really cold, sometimes our capillaries open up and create a bleeding process. Yeah, it is an issue, but it takes a few minutes to get that done. This morning, we have a public hearing pursuant to resolution number 68, adopted on February 17th, 2009, to consider the termination of an application for Minnesota statutes 273.1115, aggregate resource preservation property tax law. Paul, do you have, this is a public hearing, are you going to read the portion?
This hearing will be conducted pursuant to applicable Minnesota statutes and the standing rules of the County Board. Copies of the standing rules are available upon request. There will be a formal record made of this proceeding. Accordingly, we request all speakers sign up, state your name and address at the beginning of your testimony. Both verbal testimony and documentary evidence will be accepted by the Board. The order for today's hearing will be as follows. Administration and/or the County Assessor will make the initial presentation. Representatives from other affected governmental agencies may appear and give testimony. Supporters of opting out of the aggregate resource preservation property tax law may appear and give testimony. And finally, opponents of opting out of the aggregate resource preservation property tax law may appear and give testimony. Commissioners may question witnesses at the end of the witness's testimony or at the end of all testimony.
Thank you, Paul. The beginning of this public hearing will begin with the administration and/or the county assessor making their initial presentation. Administrator Mitchell.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, the Minnesota legislature in 2008 passed a piece of legislation that allowed counties to value aggregate resources or gravel property in a different fashion than it has been valued in the past. The law did authorize a county to opt out. If the county failed to opt out by 2010, then the counties were automatically required to value the property differently. We did receive a bulletin from the Association of Minnesota Counties advising counties to opt out of this particular legislation because you can always enter back into it, but you can't opt out after you are once in it. Now, upon receipt of that particular bulletin from the Association of Counties, we had a meeting with the assessor, the auditor, the public works director, and administration to discuss what this particular legislation meant to St. Louis County and the reasons why we would elect to opt out or to remain or become covered by the piece of legislation. We talked about the possibility of the legislation having a positive effect on gravel being available or a negative effect on it. We spoke about the additional work that it would require of the assessor's office. We talked about whether there was any true benefit to the persons holding the property and or to move those gravel resources. We also discussed the effect that it would have on other taxpayers because the difference in the tax would then be shifted to other property owners. That discussion fluctuated between the positives and the negatives, and there are some both ways, but at the conclusion of that discussion, it was decided that unanimously that we would come to the board and recommend that we opt out of this particular legislation at this time. And the very specific reasons that we would recommend to the board to opt out is it would require substantial additional work for the assessors department. And Dave Cipolla from the county assessor is here to discuss that just a little bit after I finish the comments. We did not believe that it would provide a greater resource, the gravel itself, to be available within the county. We felt, if anything, it would probably limit the availability of gravel in certain times whenever the gravel prices might be reduced because of the economy or the availability, etc. Those who are having a reduced tax on the property might well hold on to it rather than be willing to move it at that particular time. We didn't see that being covered by the legislation would necessarily provide any greater resource. The gravel is there in this county. It's pretty much known where the gravel is, and it's available as being taxed right at this time, so we didn't see any benefit to the county or any public works projects at that time. And finally, the fact that once under the legislation you cannot get out, but the fact that if you stay out of it at this time, at any point in the future that it seems that that has changed the whole economic base or the reasons why we have given at this point change, you can in fact then include yourself under the legislation. So for those reasons, we're recommending to the board that at this time that we opt out. And I also will just advise the board that the legislation doesn't require you to take action until either after there's 60 days after an application or 2010, but we just felt that we don't want this to be shuffled off somewhere at this time and then forgotten about, because it also, as I said, anytime somebody comes forward and presents an argument or a reason that this board believes would justify going under this legislation, you can in fact change your decision at that time. So with that, I'd like to ask Dave Cipolla to come up and just talk a little bit about the assessor's department and the cost and the requirements of the legislation to the assessor's office. Thank you.
Mr. Cipolla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Mitchell. Just as some background on where this law came from, it's our understanding that it was primarily put in place for some of the metro area counties. They have a much more developed property and a scarcity of gravel resources. And in particular, the city of Woodbury, as I understand it, is built on a massive gravel resource that, had planning been done differently, they might have mined that away before they actually did the development there. It's really set up for more developed counties. We don't have those issues here. We do have a lot of gravel resources and public land here, which lessens the need for this sort of a law in this part of the county. From the assessor's perspective, this is really a Green Acres for Gravel Pits program. We would be required to create a second value that would be placed on properties who would enroll in this program. The Green Acres program is very time-intensive, work-intensive, and we also feel it would probably be beneficial to a very small subset of taxpayers in the county. A lot of work for a very limited benefit. It's also our understanding from discussion with the Department of Revenue rep, there are not any other counties in our region who have actually opted to implement this program. All of them are either have or are in the process of opting out.
Commissioner Forsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave, Commissioner Sweeney and I, prior to the meeting, had the question, is this only referred to gravel resources, or can it, and because it does mention mining in there, is it only the gravel, or could it be other types of mining that are addressed by this statute?
Yeah, I believe it refers to as aggregate so it's my understanding that's gravel.
Okay. Just to be clear there, 'cause
Right.
she and I were not clear on it there prior to the.
Right, I'm not aware that it affects anything other than aggregate.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Sweeney?
I guess my one concern would be, seeing as how we have basically identified where gravel is available in the county, and we know that, is there something now that prevents someone from buying a potential gravel pit and building a home there, using it that way? And are we then being short-sighted in when the present gravel pits run out, that we don't short ourselves like the metro area did? And so is there any,
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that prevents that from happening right now, although I don't perceive that this is a problem in this area.
but would this?
I suppose it might, although I don't think that the scarcity of gravel is a problem here like it is down in the metro area.
Address that from the opposite side. It's a pretty good question in terms of our development. Are we, regardless of are we developing fast enough, I think is what Commissioner Sweeney is saying, to assume that there's that this may be a short-term solution, but by opting out, but long-term that we would in fact limit the amount of gravel supply that was necessary. Is that what you were saying, Commissioner Sweeney?
I'm certainly no, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm certainly no expert on gravel, but we did discuss that at the meeting that we had. And I believe that what we discussed at that time was the fact that gravel right now has much greater value than the property itself in this county because of the great amount of property that we have, and therefore it's very unlikely, certainly we can't say it'll never happen, but it's very unlikely that anybody would take a piece of property that has gravel value and then simply build a house on it. And I think that's, what we discussed. Do we see that possibly happening? And I think our perspective of it was it isn't going to happen because there's nobody who's going to take and cover up the worth of the value or the value of the gravel to build a house on when we have all the property available that we have in this county that they could either buy much cheaper or would be much less costly to them to build the building on or the facility on, right?
Yes.
Commissioner Forsman?
To that point, and I do agree with that, now that gravel resources have been identified pretty much throughout the county, but if, to put some place that everybody knows, if you go just east of our Joint Public Works facility in Ely, that is a huge gravel esker that goes, that big hill is all one huge gravel esker, goes down through the DNR property, and DNR, the old Hidden Valley is all one huge gravel esker. And many homes were built on there before they realized that it was a huge gravel esker, and there is homes all the way through there. So, but they were built years ago, probably the exploration, the identification of that was not there. So there are places in the county and right in my hometown where it has been done in the past. But I do agree with our administrator that in a real world situation with today's knowledge, I don't think someone would purposely build on top of a gravel resource. So, thank you.
Administrator Mitchell?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, a discussion was had at our meeting, but the point was you have to know it's gravel before you can
Yeah, exactly.
Submit an application for this particular bill, and therefore if you don't know it's gravel, you're not going to apply anyways, and you may or may not build. So until you know it's gravel, this legislation doesn't come into effect, and then once you know it's gravel, you're not going to build on it for the value of land that you can buy anywhere else versus the value of the gravel. So, okay.
Well, it does bring a question to my mind, though. Should we, if we're successful here today in opting out for the moment, should we be making sure that within the departments, for example, the Planning Commission or the Planning Department is aware that gravel is that gravel is an issue, and that as permits are being put out or other plats are being looked at, that be one of the options that be discussed in the application process. It was kind of a question.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, we did not get to that level of discussion.
Okay, sounds fine. Ms.
But it is something I think that we should make our planning department aware of, that they add that to their looking at properties.
Are there any other questions of Dave or the county administrator? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Auditor Dicklich, had you an intention to speak this morning? Okay, having not, representatives of other affected governments and agencies may testify. Is there anyone representing other governmental agencies in the room? Seeing none, we'll move on. Supporters of opting out of the aggregate tax consideration? Seeing none. Opposed? That would like to testify? Seeing none. Is there any other testimony that needs to become before this public hearing? On a resolution to close?
Move we close the public hearing.
It's been moved and supported. We close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. It is closed. There is a resolution attached.
So moved.
It has
Support.
been moved and supported. Debate? Commissioner Sweeney, you want to direct us, administration, to talk to planning and others who would be looking at development throughout the community to include aggregate as a consideration before permitting?
I think we probably got that message, but yes, I think it would be a good idea. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Again, thank you. At this time, citizens will be allowed to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, you will be allowed to address the motion at the time that the motion is on the floor. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't we talk about this just? No, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This morning, I just wanted to, I don't have any prepared remarks, but I did want to come before this board and also to speak to the residents of St. Louis County about many of the comments and discussion that have surrounded the Senate. I guess it's in the contest phase right now between Mr. Coleman and Mr. Franken. Things such as shenanigans in St. Louis County, illegal ballots. As recently as last week, one of the attorneys for one of the contestants put forth some claims and some information through a public like a press conference, press release, in making all kinds of wild claims. I'm here to, and as of today, he's still trying to get his foot out of his mouth, but he's having a hard time getting past the knee. That's how far he had it down his throat. So, and I just want to assure the people of this county that Mr. Tingela, clerk and director of elections, has done a great job. And all of those election officials throughout the county, all the way down through those township clerks, those city clerks, right down to the election officials that sit at the polls every day, and actually are, virtually they're volunteers. They do receive pay, but they're there from 7 o'clock in the morning, many of them, until midnight. And when you're dealing with 140,000 votes, there may be a few clerical errors, but every one of these charges so far have been answered by St. Louis County, and not one retraction by any of these media outlets that, unfortunately, it seems like many times nowadays they want to make the news rather than report the news. Now, that said, when the attorney for the one contestant had their press conference last week, actually when he talked to Mr. Tingela, he actually characterized it as stagecraft. So I mean, and that's, that may be part of the legal process and the things that happen outside of the courtroom, as well as many times, sometimes these grandstand things take place inside the courtroom. I also want to thank the county attorney's office. They've been very supportive, right from the recount through the current phase, starting with the state canvassing board piece, right through the trial piece. Gary Bjorklund, Assistant County Attorney Bjorklund, has been assisting us, doing an excellent job, but the whole staff assisted us. Quite a few members of the staff, not the whole staff, but quite a few members of the staff, including the attorney herself, did help us through the recount process. So I want to thank them because they've helped guide us through this process as well, and they've done a great job. But I just can't say enough about the election officials in St. Louis County. And again, as I said, you have the leadership of Mr. Tingela, which goes a long way towards getting it there, but each and every one of those people out there do a great job for our elections, and I just want to thank them and let the people of St. Louis County know that it's been proven out so far that there is no fraud going on in St. Louis County, notwithstanding the comments of various media and other people. And no one's been able to prove any of that. Any ballots that were missing were found. Any issues that have arisen so far, we've been able to answer them adequately and positively. And so I think the people of St. Louis County should be proud of their election workers, and I certainly am proud of them, and I support them wholeheartedly, 100%. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Comments or questions? Commissioner Dahlberg. Commissioner Sweeney, you might want to turn your mic off.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Dahlberg.
And I wanted to, you don't have to, you can have a seat. I just wanted to make a comment from two perspectives. And I just wanted to say, Mr. Dicklich, ditto, as far as that I agree that it's just an exemplary performance, and also to Mr. Tingela. And I'm going to speak from two perspectives. It's kind of interesting, but of course I just came through a campaign. And those of us who work closely here will acknowledge that they're nothing but fair and above board. And there's, they play it even for every single candidate that comes in. They give total respect. I really appreciate that. And that's my one perspective. And on the other side, sometimes it's fact is stranger than fiction, and how some of these twists have taken. It's amazing. And I'm sorry for Mr. Tingela and Don Dicklich. I know it's been portrayed that it's sort of a drama of Hollywood proportions, and unfortunately you've had to play a major role in there, and it's sorry that you have to be there. But why I say fact is stranger than fiction is I got a call from a reporter on a late evening in my law office, and they said, to Chris Dahlberg. I said yes, and they said, we're not actually calling you, we're calling your wife Catherine. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting. And I thought this was because my wife's an interpreter, and sometimes they do some stories on that. And it was actually because hers was one of the absentee ballots that was challenged. And, my thoughts right from the beginning was, and afterwards, as they followed up with the interview, and maybe they were a little disappointed, I said, listen, I said, as far as the story you're looking for, I will acknowledge that I know these individuals, and I feel that they're just nothing but above board, and you're not going to find anything here. And that remains today. So, unfortunately, sometimes the media nowadays does sometimes take the turns of the National Enquirer perspective. It's sad that happens nowadays, but I think we do have to acknowledge that we really have stand-up people in St. Louis County. Thanks.
Commissioner, I was noticing that you do get as much publicity in the Twin Cities as you did in Duluth. He's right. That article was in the Twin Cities newspaper, and it was comical to say the least. Commissioner Nelson and Commissioner Sweeney.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner Fink, and thank you, Auditor Dicklich, for coming forward to make those comments. He made a point of complimenting nearly everyone there, but noticeably, at least to me, left himself out. And I think that we as a board, we do need to acknowledge the hard work of these men and women throughout St. Louis County, whether they're in townships or in cities. It is unfortunate that the circus-like atmosphere is attempting to impugn the integrity of all of these individuals that have worked so hard for so many years to make certain that it's done right. So I don't wear a hat, but I'll take Commissioner Forsman's hat off to all of the men and women, from Auditor Dicklich to Clerk Tinula, right on down to the township volunteers and cities throughout our county. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Here, here. Commissioner Sweeney.
Mine is just a quick comment. During the recount, I had an opportunity, because I was in the building many of those days, to come in and visit with, and on both sides of the aisle. It was very funny because they came in and immediately the two camps kind of went to the one side and one to the other, just kind of automatically. And strangely enough, the Democrats were on the left, and you know where the Republicans were. But I did have a chance to talk to them, and they were all very, very pleased with the way our staff was handling things. There were some little glitches early on that all got, taken care of, and for the most part, it was a very smooth, very well-run operation, and I did not, in talking to them, got no complaints from the people who were here watching that count. And if there'd been problems, I think people would have spoken up and said, we don't think this is right, or we don't think so. I mean, it was a really good, well-run, clean operation, and I am very proud of our staff in this building that did that too. They were unbelievable. And like I say, they were very, very kind and very easy to work with. I mean, people did not have complaints, and I think there's a lot to be said for that too, in the way the people have been trained, and I want to thank everybody. Thank you.
Commissioner Forsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the auditor had his hand up also, just say. But just my comment is that, and because it needs, others have said it, thank you for the work that you do, and knowing the people involved, knowing our auditor, knowing very well our clerk of court, our clerk of board, excuse me, our clerk of board. These are good people with high integrity. They wouldn't even be where they were without that, without the integrity they bring. The comment that I have is a little bit different, and I'll be real quick about it, is that I hope when this Senate contest is over, that I don't have to hear from people when we have 3 million votes and it's probably separated by a couple hundred when we're all done, that I have to hear from people, whoever wins or loses, well, we voted them out of office. Excuse me, half the people, I don't care how statistically it's half and half, because at other elections I've heard this, we got rid of that person or whatever. Well, you know what? It's a half and half election. This obviously this state is divided 50-50, and 200 votes one way or another isn't going to mean a bit of difference there. And I commend the two candidates, Al Franken and Senator Coleman, for their efforts, their campaign, and everything else. But I hope we're not going to vilify one candidate or the other when we're done with it, because half this, and I stop with this, half of the Minnesota thought this was the candidate, half the Minnesota thought the other one. We're not voting somebody out when it's a 50-50 race. So thank you.
Mr. Dicklich, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, Commissioner Sweeney brought up one group of people that in my discussion, I failed to recognize, I think, sufficiently. When I was recognizing Mr. Tinula, I was, including his staff, but the staff that worked on this recount and his everyday staff, they've done a yo person's job. I can't use the term yeoman. I don't think it's fair, because I think they're all females in there. So we've got the yo person's job, but they have done a great job. getting all this extra documentation, et cetera, put together for you can't believe the data requests that we've gotten, and so I don't want to forget them, so I just want to mention them and thank them as well. They've done a great job. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To end this particular conversation, since I see no one else with their hand up, I've been reading, I for one have had some experience with a close race or two and a recount, so I'm somewhat familiar with what goes through that, and I can tell you that from my own personal experience here in St. Louis County, you're absolutely right. Everybody who's involved in the election process from the beginning through the end of the process, including recounts, work hard to make sure that they get it correct, and we all need to be complimented for that. But more than that, if you move outside of the actual theatrics that are going on in this particular election, and any other recount that's occurred where there is some theatrics that go on, the reality is that people that are watching from the sides are writing commentaries, and they are not talking about the negativeness here or the momentary moments in front of the press. What they are talking about is the significance of how the process in Minnesota is so much significantly better than many of the other states who have had close races in the past. And what we're arguing about is not what you count and what you don't count, or in the recount. Well, that's what we're arguing about. What should be counted within the recount and what's not. Not whether or not there's a Chad or whether or not the right number of ballots have been put forth. So the commentary on the state of Minnesota has been much more positive than what those momentary lapses are when you get out in front of the media for the moment. Again, thank you very much. Nice comment, and hope everyone gets to hear what you all said. One more time, is there anyone else from the floor that wants to make a comment? Seeing none, the consent agenda would be in order. Been moved and supported on the consent agenda. Are there any issues? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, thank you very much. Reports of boards and committees. The Environment and Natural Resource Committee, Chairman Forsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one item, and that item is an item discussed relatively well, I believe, at our Committee of the Whole, and I would move it, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved and supported by two. You got that? Commissioner Sweeney supports. Is there comments or concerns about this particular resolution? Commissioner Sweeney.
There was just one thing that I caught, or I didn't really catch, but that I understand. We didn't put an end language into the Joint Powers Board, and it does have an end, but by just that this is a grant for the investigatory and the preliminary engineering and what have you. But I just still think that it would be wise to have something that actually says that the only job of this board will be to go through that process until it is determined what and how they are going forward, and at that point they would have to form a sewer district or whatever, and the Joint Powers Board would be dissolved. And I don't see anything that spells that out clearly enough, and I'm wondering if there is a way to do that.
Mr. Chair, for point of information,
Yes, sir.
as maker of the motion, I would be glad to turn to the attorney or administration to include some language that would do that.
Thank you. I noticed that Administrator Mitchell had his hand in the air. Would you like to speak to that particular issue, sir?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, to attempt to make this clearer, adding something is not a substantial issue, I don't believe, except we would have to circulate it back to the township and to the sanitary district, as they've already taken board action and executed it, but that's fine. I would point out, at least those so that the board is aware, on page 1, starting at the bottom of the page, under purpose, it does indicate, as you read through that paragraph, I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but as you go through it, it does indicate that this joint powers agreement is only for the purpose of the feasibility study and the report by a professional engineer. The question was raised about the last portion of that paragraph. That raised a little bit of a question, and I understand that you not being part of the full negotiations and discussions, you don't always get the benefit of the comments that everybody else is making. Cap Togama was probably much more concerned about this ending at the conclusion of the study until other monies were found, et cetera, than even St. Louis County was, although we did make it very clear during the negotiations that we had committed for $100,000, and that was all that we had committed for, and we were not going to commit for any more here. But C was added because of the timing of all this, in that we started the process with the $100,000 from the county, and then we started the joint powers agreement at the same time that the grant request was going to IRRB. The IRRB had not made a decision yet when we started drafting this document, and the document was actually drafted by Barb Russ in the County Attorney's Office, not Cap Togama or Crane Lake Sanitary District, but by the county. And the Cap Togama people came back because they wanted to make sure it was clear that the parties, none of the parties were putting any more money in than what they had already put in the initial preparation of the study. It's in the county, the $100,000, and so the C was put in for the grant writing and the lobbying, just in case some additional money was necessary for the study, because the study at $200,000 was a rough estimate. It wasn't an absolute dollar amount, and IRR, about the time that we added that particular provision, had then indicated that they would only give us $50,000, but indicated that it was likely that they would give us $50,000 of additional money this June, but they did not guarantee it necessarily, but said it was likely. So it was possible for us to be $50,000 short. It was possible for us to be additional dollars short if the study actually cost more. So that provision was put in simply to be able to go out and try to find another source of money if more than 200 or more than 150 was necessary for the study, and IRR didn't give it. So that paragraph really started out with the purpose, ending with simply being the study, and then C was added in case more money was necessary for the study. And like I said, I just wanted the whole board to be aware of those negotiations, how it got there, and like I said, if you decide to put something else in, we can put it in. We would have to recirculate it just to get signatures of the other two entities again. Thank you.
Commissioner Rocker?
Thank you, Chair Fink. I think part of my question's been answered, but I just thought there would have been some benefit to having a brief synopsis of what it is we're talking about provided at the front end here for the benefit of our folks in the audience as well as the viewing audience. I don't think that was done, but we got bits and pieces of it there, but perhaps just a little summary would help.
Mr. Chair, if the board would like, what we are discussing here is an initial proposal from Cap Togama and Crane Lake Sanitary Water District, where they came and asked if the county would participate because of Ash River truly being a non-named, but we call it Ash River, non-organized township that the county board would represent because of the statutory provision that the county board represents all unorganized townships. They asked us to commit to $100,000 to supplement some work that they had already begun and had already started to look at a way to eliminate some of the sewage, et cetera, flowing into National Park, and indicated that they thought that the federal government would be very likely to support some type of an overall sanitary sewer system in this area. They indicated the project was likely to be, from the preliminary work they had done, likely to be in the neighborhood of $28 million. They understood that neither the county nor the other two areas would ever be able to fund that if that was the final price, and that's why they thought that in getting a study done, they could approach the federal government and look to the federal government to take this under consideration for an appropriation because of the park. So the board did authorize $100,000 out of the Environmental Trust Fund at that time, the Environmental Trust Fund being specifically dedicated to projects that are utilized to clean up areas or to provide systems to prevent any type of further environmental harm. And with that $100,000, they indicated they thought that they could approach the IRR and receive some money from them, and most likely a like amount to go ahead with the study. Once we agreed to that, we kind of thought we were going to be finished with our part of the project, but questions started to arise to how we would manage those monies, and with that we agreed to look at a joint powers agreement to set up some type of a representation to make sure that the study was going forward in the fashion. That ended up with this joint powers agreement that's before you today between Captogama, Crane Lake Sanitary Sewer District, and St. Louis County as the representative for the unorganized area that we refer to as Ash River. IRR did come forward with $50,000, and as I said earlier, said that they were likely to come forward with another $50,000 when their new budget was in place July 1st of this year, 2009, but they didn't actually guarantee it at the time, and as I said before, that's why we put the provision in there in this joint powers agreement to be able to go out and look for some additional money if it was necessary. The idea is simply to get a study together that would lay out alternative options, and those options might be a sanitary sewer district. It might be a sanitary sewer district for each area. It might be a collector in an area. None of those types of things are decided yet, and that's the purpose of the study, really, is to go in and see what would be the most beneficial and efficient for this area to address some of those environmental concerns. And then once the study is done, then it would be a decision of all the parties, again, whether they were going to support or pursue either federal legislation and appropriation for the project, or whether the study indicated that it was not a viable project in the way that it was being proposed for the three areas surrounding the national park. So I think that's, unless there are other questions, I think that's a quick background on the project itself and why it's here back in front of the board. Thank you.
Satisfied? Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Fink. One of the things I think it's important to recognize is that while this project in the Namakan Basin is extremely important to us, throughout this country, there are counties and townships and local municipalities that are all trying to get these projects on the board prior to June. So the timeliness of this, there's a lot of work that needs to be done between right now, today, and when the final application is due in Washington. So I hope that there's enough comfort on this board to understand that this is a planning stage, and without the federal government stepping into this, there will be no project. So we do have an awful lot of work that needs to be done between today and probably the final day for this group is going to be sometime at the tail end of May to make certain that this project gets on the list. We believe that this project, given its proximity to the national park, will rise up on that list to the very top, and in so doing, will afford the people of this county the opportunity to make certain that we're protecting that water basin, and think of the jobs that would be created under the stimulus package in construction and the work that would be involved in assuring clean water into the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no other comments, I'm going to make a comment here. Commissioner Sweeney makes an excellent point, and in the explanation from the administrator, I would look to the maker and ask for a friendly. And here would be what the friendly would look like. In portion C, under the proposal, under the purpose of this, where we were looking at A, B, and C as the process portion, it's on the right off the first page, top of the second page on the Joint Powers Board. On the Joint Powers Board agreement. Do we have a copy? Does everybody have copies of the Joint Powers Agreement? Commissioner Sweeney?
I have an idea, and let me run this first. Could we do an addendum to this, rather than changing the agreement? That we would do a little addendum that just stated that that was the fact. Then it would not have to be, it would only have to go back to those two entities to add that to it, and it would be attached to it. Is that a possibility? Rather than changing language in this that then would circulate it all and then come back to us? Is there an easier way to do this that maybe just states that as far as St. Louis County is concerned, that at the end of A, B, and C, the board will be dissolved, without changing the language in the agreement here, that addendum be added from St. Louis County?
Okay, got it. Administrator?
That wouldn't stall things, I guess that's what I'm...
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think the board can do just about anything they want. But I'd also like to point out again that if you look at paragraph 8 on the termination, it does say that any party can terminate with 30 days notice. And the party here is the board, meaning any commissioner could come in front of this body right here and make a motion and get support. And if there are 4 votes, the agreement would be terminated in 30 days. So there is already a 30-day termination clause in paragraph 8, but like I said, the board, if that's what the board directs, that's what we'll end up doing.
Commissioner Sweeney, follow up?
Let's follow up then. I think there's enough protection for us here that I don't want to see this slowed down in the least. I think it can go forward. We've worked with these before. I mean, the county has been involved in these things before. And we do represent that township. I mean, that's part of our job as commissioners. We represent that township. And I think that, you know, we may have to be involved again in something else at a later date, just simply because we do represent that township. So I think we're safe, and I shudder to think that something that we would do as a board would slow this down enough so that it might not make it to the designated date that they need to have this done by. So I think we've got our bases covered. You got the 30-day language in there. I think there's a good understanding between the parties. This is a short-term thing. One of the things I was concerned about is a lot of times these things drag on for years, and the faces change around the table. And so pretty soon there's a fuzzier understanding of what the thing was put together for. So I think it covers our bases, and I think we should just move it forward the way it is.
Thank you. Commissioner Sweeney, however, I am going to still ask for a friendly. On item number C, the item reads that for grant writing and for lobbying services to seek additional federal funding, federal and state financial assistance to fund any portion of the study period. The reason that would be a case, because the rest of the sentence goes on to say area recommended for wastewater treatment. Wastewater issues are listed in item B, and this would not be about the area as Mr. Mitchell talked about. Every one of these then would every one A, B, and C would relate specifically to the study, which is exactly what you all talked about today. Would you consider that, Commissioner Forsman?
Mr. Chair, what I'm thinking is that, you know, with due respect to your offer there, is that we did have the county attorney look at it and did help set up the joint powers agreement, and I have a lot of respect for the attorney's office, knowing that Attorney Russ worked on it. I think that was probably set up as well as possible, and I really am worried about the short time frame and the fact that if we change things within the joint powers agreement, we end up slowing down a process that right now I think that we want to keep on rolling as we look at the whole world is looking at the United States and shovel-ready projects. This one right here, a week can make the difference between shovel-ready and not doing. So, I mean, I think that we truly should take and anything that we do here is going to change because we as a township board, and that's what we're working as right now, as a township board, as the township board for that unorganized township, I think that we have to remember our partners of Crane Lake Sanitary District and Cabotogama, that they would have to see those changes. They may not meet for another 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. So with due respect, I do agree that that could make it streamlined, but I think that it could take and work against the project, and so for that reason, I wouldn't accept it as a friendly, certainly your option beyond that, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Forsman, you said a great deal of things, and many of them leads right into a larger conversation that would suggest that the challenge that I see at this moment, and the challenge I see is that there are openings on the back end of this particular contract, and with all due respect to Ms. Rush in her writings, I believe that she was intending to modify that particular sentence when she used area recommended for wastewater treatment as opposed to ending the study. We have some choices here. The back end of this needs to be closed up. If it's not closed up, then you lose a vote. So I'm going to try and figure out how to vote for this. And so I'm going to see if we can in fact catch a debate on this for a second. So I'd like to move the change that I recommended, and I would need support. And essentially, all I would do is put a period after study, which would eliminate the words area recommended for wastewater treatment. Is there support for that?
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion.
Okay. With that, since I made the motion and the process that we've been using, I'll make an argument for it. This particular Joint Powers Board is not about us representing the township officers. In fact, this particular Joint Powers Board uses this board's authority to appoint somebody on this particular board, and then it appoints two commissioners as well. This is about overseeing a project, as Commissioner Rocker asked for explanation on and got. This is about overseeing a project that can get off the ground and get done. There ought to be limits to that. There ought to be a starting point and something that clearly defines an end. The two sentences that does not clearly define an end, and one of them is this item number C that I talk about, because it tends to extend the grant writing and the lobbying services beyond the study area to other things beyond the study. And in the closure, Administrator Mitchell is absolutely right that it allows for anybody on this board to come forward in whenever the study is done. But the reality is that each one of us on this board is extremely busy. And for us to follow that beyond the two representatives that we have on the board is going to be only through reports of committees at the end of these meetings and typically we do that sometimes and sometimes we do not. But if in 2 years, let's say this study takes longer than just a couple months to determine what kind of wastewater treatment is going to be there, in 2 years, is anybody going to remember that this was actually being done, or at what point we were at to study it? And my only argument is that there probably is another Joint Powers Board that's going to be necessary to absolutely implement any conclusions that this report would have. So the idea here would be to make sure that this Joint Powers Board has a significant beginning and a definite ending. And when the study is done, this Joint Powers Board should be eliminated for whatever is going to be the next step. And that would be my argument on this particular thing. Now, with that in mind, I saw Commissioner Nelson's hand in the air. Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Commissioner Fink. You know, it's interesting. I cannot imagine that this board would scrutinize something that we have two seated members of this board on with the intent to review every action that is taken. Perhaps what I should do, Commissioner Fink, is I should withdraw from this board and maybe ask that we put a Duluth area commissioner on it, because then it would be scrutinized properly. I am offended. I'm sorry, I am offended. Commissioner Forsman and I want to take the time to make certain. I volunteered early on to Mike that I would help him on this project up in that district. You know, if we don't start having some trust and faith in one another, we might as well give this endeavor up. I will tell you that if you understood township government, and I know I made this comment a week ago, and I meant it then and I mean it today, township government is currently 7 days away from their annual meeting. They will have their annual meeting. Then they would have to notice a reorganizational meeting and notice a secondary meeting. This action today would cost us a minimum of 20 days. 20 days that this project can ill afford. But you know, one of the things we do in government, those of us who want to be part of the bureaucratic process, is we'll put it off and we'll put it off and we'll put it off, and then we'll wonder why it went away. This is a good project. This is a project that has a lot of potential. Congressman Oberstar has indicated he's 100% supportive of this project and wants to see it put into the package. You know, if it wasn't for that unorganized territory, this county board wouldn't be involved at all. Crane Lake, the Namakan folks would have done this. The fact of the matter is, it took a long time to put this agreement together. If you asked Administrator Mitchell, he would tell you that the legal representative from the township, which he stated part of, was scrutinized this to the nth degree to make certain that the township he represented was taken care of in this. There's not a lot of money up there. We obviously, as a county, don't have the resources to build this out. We're talking about a process that gets us to a grant. And if I need to withdraw so that we can put someone from down south here that has time to pick through this, every period, every explanation point, then I will withdraw and let this board appoint someone that they perhaps have more confidence in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Having seen no hands, I will respond to you, Commissioner. You know, my dad used to say, when you come home and I look at you and say something and you protest too loudly and too vehemently, that he would always be concerned. You protest too loudly and too concerning, Commissioner. I do think that it's all right to protest, but in this case, you have only made my point. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, there's an amendment on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Aye. Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on this particular resolution? All those in favor?
I do
Sir.
have a little discussion. And I wanted to say I'm going to support this. And we had a little bit of discussion last week, and I think it's Commissioner Forsman's district, and you know, I acknowledge, I feel he's done his work on this. I'm new on this. I'd like to get maybe afterwards a copy of the study as far as what the actual environmental issues were up there. But here's my concern, and I just want to reiterate this. And I understand this is a different time we're in, because we're trying to get this as far as for a deadline, and I appreciate that. The one discussion I did bring up is that, and this is an environmental committee, that's why it's under that, is that there's going to be a lot of areas that need this, and it's just kind of the nature too, is the north has a lot of vast areas with thinly populated populations up there, and yet they're going to have some significant environmental issues. And I was saying that we have to weigh some of the environmental issues and what the costs are. And I guess my only point is, I think we have to start looking perhaps some long range in the future, and this would be a good discussion going forward and for the board down the road, is from a policy perspective. How are we going to decide? Because this is just one study, but I can see other people, groups coming to us for studies to ask about this and, following. And so I support this. I'll vote for it, but I just want to put out there from a fiscal point and a policy point, we've got some major issues, don't we? But it doesn't mean that we can't work together on this.
Commissioner Forsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and not to belabor this, but a couple things were not mentioned in this, is that, and it has been said that in order to get the Fed to even get a positive in any type of a stimulus package or anything from the federal government, there has to be a plan out there. That's what where we're at right now. And but just some little bit of background. I mentioned it at committee of the whole last week. There is the park actually went out and did sampling on. First of all, you have to know that chain of not chain of lakes, but that group of lakes, the Nanakan Basin, is glacier carved out with very little fauna or soil on it. You're looking at ledge rock going down into lakes, and because of that, it is a very difficult, compared to the rest of St. Louis County, actually most of St. Louis County, to sewer. And as there has been built up of resorts in there all the way back to the turn of this, well, shortly after the turn of the 20th century, resorts and those kinds of things, there have been issues on trying to sewer those areas. The park, and I'll just throw this in there, and I mentioned it, the park actually did some sampling. They found evidence of human waste when they did the Kabetogama Lake. Not to the point where it was, where the water was, quote, polluted like you might see in some of the lakes down south and stuff like that, where you have a huge buildup, but to the point where they were concerned. And that started I believe that's what started the initial talk on trying to to make sure that we save environmentally this group of lakes in the Nanakan Basin that feed right into our neighbor Canada. So I mean, it truly is international, and we feed right through our Voyageurs National Park, and part of it feeds through the Boundary Waters canoe area, this whole Nanakan Basin. So when you look at it, take that back, the Boundary Waters, just a small part of it, just because it's flowing the other way, but a small part of it. All of that said is that because of that, there is a real strong reason why the federal government, because of its ownership, is interested in this project. But Congressman Obastar has shown a very positive response to it. Senator Klobuchar has given a very positive response to this, because we are looking at an international issue and a federal issue, and that's the reason that I believe that we need to move forward with this planning thing, and we have to move relatively fast, because our administration in Washington right now is poised to look for those things that might be shovel-ready, for those things that they can actually get the public behind. And if the public can't get behind saving our waterways that feed internationally, then we have a huge problem. So Commissioner Dahlberg, I kind of expanded on your question there, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me say that.
Commissioner Acker.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Fink. Just a couple of comments. This project is obviously a potentially multi-million-dollar project, and I think certainly it would be easy to take an out-of-sight, out-of-mind issue on these environmental issues that are of such significance in the area. But to the credit of everybody who's been involved in this for a number of years and bringing it to this point, it is here today, and it is with eyes wide open that we are trying to commit some monies to addressing a bigger environmental issue that could only get worse if it's ignored and nothing is done about it, not only for St. Louis County, but for the national park as well. There have been many times when I have really appreciated the scrutiny that Commissioner Fink has so many times given to a number of issues, whether they be north, south, east, or west. And it has been appreciated because he does take the time to try to understand all these issues, regardless of whether they're in his district or not, with a big picture view of St. Louis County. But in this instance, I hope that your concerns are not rooted in a lack of trust of those that we're appointing to this committee. And I think I'm right on that they're not rooted in that. But in view of the other safeguards that are in this agreement relative to the termination language and the change that you sought, I think you should take some comfort in knowing that we have good representatives on here. We will continue to be the elected body representing the unorganized area up there should future issues arise and the need for future commitment or resources arise. And I have every confidence to believe that our two representatives from this board will keep us, and anyone who wants to be informed about this can be as informed as they wish as it moves forward. So that being said, I think your concerns are valid, but in this instance, ill-placed because every safeguard that is needed to assure a comfort level to vote for this, I believe, is in this agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I got one more. First, thank you very much for your comments. This is not seated in the trust of the folks who are on the board. This is seated in the potential for no limitations on the back end to obligate this board in the long term to another sewer project pretty much like Midway. And I believe that we've been trying to get out of Midway now since Commissioner Sweeney has been a commissioner. And we still have not accomplished that goal. But there are some positive signs on the future. And what tends to happen with these projects, and I'm listening to the wonderful conversations about the speed and shovel ready and a number of other important things. But the truth of the matter is that when this study begins, once a decision is made on what kind of a septic system is going, or clean wastewater treatment system should be used in each of the communities or connected to all the other communities are necessary, before they can move forward with anything else, there will need to be an environmental impact study done. Mostly because it's going to mean some tearing up some ground. Unfortunately, that doesn't provide for a study to be completed by June, nor does it include for a study to be done by the end of the year. Actually, it's going to be a couple of years. This Joint Powers Board is not going to end at the end of September because we think that we're prepared. In fact, it's going to be a completely different than that. Somebody's going to have to be hired, and just the process alone will take us into the middle of June to do the studying. So I think that maybe we are looking at both short-term and long-term things. And Commissioner Rocker, I'd like to think that I am looking out for the entire county, because I do think that at some particular point, this county is going to be asked to support somehow the continuation of the project when it moves down the road. I don't know whether there's going to be stimulus money available in the future. What I know is that the project itself is a good project, but it shouldn't be the obligation of St. Louis County to make sure that it gets done. The project itself. It should only be the obligation of the county to make sure that the study gets done in a manner that allows for everybody to have its input, which is what I think Commissioner Nelson has suggested that should be done, as has Commissioner Forsman. I do think that we ought to be instead of rushing to judgment on which each of us thinks is our responsibility here or not our responsibility, we ought to be thinking about what is going to be the responsibility long term for everyone who's involved at the end of the day. And the end of the day doesn't stop when the study stops. And that's the problem with the Joint Powers Board. The Joint Powers Board doesn't stop exactly when the study stops. If there's money left over from the study, that money will be able to be used for item number 3 on the purpose, which is to go out and lobby for additional money. Now, that's not what everybody's talked about today. Starting with our administrator and right on down to everyone else, we've talked about the study itself. But, you know what? I can read and count. And I can see that you all are ready to move forward anxiously, and that's okay. That's why there are 7 of us. That's why there's an opportunity for each of us to talk our way through these things. Now, you don't have to agree with me. That's all right. And I won't say, I told you so in 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years. I don't do that. I just vote no. Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Fink. Commissioner, I know you know the federal process a whole lot better than what you just indicated. We know that if we're not there when this first round of projects, whether they call them shovel-ready or however they indicate them, we know that the process is going to be much easier this time around than it will be the next time around. And we need to be on the list. Do we expect to put shovels in the ground this summer? That would be irresponsible to even think that you could get this project in the ground or even started this summer. But one other statement that you made does disturb me. You say that we don't have an obligation up there. And I would like to remind you that in the unorganized townships, in my district, in Commissioner Forsman's district, in Commissioner Sweeney's district, and in Commissioner Rocker's district, this board does have an obligation. We always have, and we always will, because we are their town board. And as their town board, we have a duty and an obligation to represent them. That is what we are attempting to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no other comments, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And aye. Nick. Well, let's move on to Public Safety and Corrections. Commissioner Sweeney, Chair.
I have one item, and it's the 2008 Homeland Security Grant for the Northern Border Interoperable Communications Equipment, and I would move it.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Are there comments? Commissioner Rocker. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Sweeney, you get to speak first.
The only thing I would refer to is, and I hope that people brought it with them today, there was a very complete memo that came out to you with regard to what equipment was being purchased. I will not bore you with that list because I have absolutely no idea what they are or what they do. They are just the kind of equipment we need to do number 2, and that's the goal of the project is to install DS3 microwave equipment, linking all counties together on a common network, allowing for current use within each county for voice and data communications, as well as future uses such as IP-based interoperability systems, programs such as multi-county joint records, CAD, IP-based next generation 911, emergency alerting systems, critical surveillance, and the list goes on and on. We've already received $2 million into this project. This is to move it another step forward. And this present funding will allow for enhancement of our current voice and data communications capabilities. It will also benefit the various Nemesis projects, including regional records management and regional computer-aided dispatch. Future benefits of this project could allow expansion of those current data sharing processes across all border counties. This project could also benefit the expansion of mobile data to Lake, Cook, and possibly Koochiching and other border counties. In addition, this project will provide capability for next generation IP-based 911 and allow the capability for transmission of other data, including video and larger data files. The other question on this was how much of it is allowed for management and administrative funds. It is 3% of the grant, or $30,000. I dropped a 0 when I reported it last week. So there you have it. Thank you.
Commissioner Rocker, you had a comment.
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, it was a result of my questions that the administration produced this very informative memo that went a long way to explaining just exactly what was going on here. And I would wholeheartedly concur with Commissioner Sweeney that if you understand what they're talking about in here, you're in the wrong business. You could be selling homeland security issues. And my, my bigger question, obviously, I'm going to be supportive of this, and because there is no local match involved, and this is $1 million coming into the county, and we have the language in there with 30% of it being captured for potential administrative costs that we might concur, it's a good deal, and we should, and it's consistent with the grants that we received in the years of 2005 and 2007. I guess the question I asked our administrator when we spoke about this just yesterday was, how are the taxpayers being served by this? Because I often raise that question and make a point that I think sometimes it's overboard with a lot of the stuff that's going on. I guess, and it could be perceived that way until you need it. You know, everybody says, talks bad about lawyers too, but then they say, you know, until you need one, your opinion changes. So that being said, I support the project, and someday maybe I'll understand the totalness of why we continue to commit these kinds of vast resources to these kinds of issues when we have crumbling schools, roads, and bridges. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Fink. The Commissioner Rocker, you do bring up an interesting point on the allocation of resources to and at what point do we stop allocating resources under the auspice of Homeland Security. But one of the residual benefits, I think, of this has been the fact that, you know, the thousands of law enforcement agencies and the network that we had in this country really didn't talk to one another just a few short years ago. And I really think that every move that we make on this, from county to county, from municipality to county, and all of those things, I think it's really important into the future. That communication network, I think, is going to serve the people of this country very well. I do wish, however, that the state of Minnesota would start aggressively looking outside of the 7-county metro when they talk about allocating the resources that are going directly to the state that aren't finding their way into greater Minnesota. So that's a huge concern of mine, but I think there's a public purpose here, and I really appreciate the efforts of Sheriff Littman and all of those involved, because I really think that St. Louis County right now is looked to as not just a regional leader, but actually a northern Minnesota leader throughout this process. And I think from that standpoint, we won't have that lack of communication in the future where those who would intend to do harm just continually move from one jurisdiction to the next without any repercussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sweeney, last word. Oh, wait a minute.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. Commissioner Dahlberg pointed out to me that I misspoke with reference to the administrative funds. It's 3%, not 30%.
Yeah, we noticed that.
Make that perfectly clear.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Just to speak to the taxpayers' interest in all of this, I believe that some of this money is saving the taxpayers having to pay for some of these improvements to our whole system. Secondly, I guess that interoperability and that ability to talk to one another and all of those things depends on whether or not you are a law-abiding citizen of the county or not a law-abiding citizen of the county. Some people may think it's a benefit to the taxpayers, and other taxpayers might think that it is to their detriment. But I think the majority would say it is to our benefit that we can bring now $3 million into the area. And this is area-wide. It's not just being used in St. Louis County. It is being used to set all of these counties up to do this. But, you know, our nemesis project here is, you know, our pride and joy. It is the something that the state was trying to do for a long time and just never did accomplish it, and they threw millions and millions of dollars at it down at the state level after Katie Poirier was abducted and killed. And they were going to get CrimNet up and running and whatever. We've developed something that is a state-of-the-art exchange of information, and it links everything, including the county attorney's office, into the loop, so that, you know, records can go directly there. There's not a time lapse in getting, you know, things there for prosecution, for, you know, various information that they may need. They have access to that. So there's all kinds of benefits that the taxpayers are reaping, but one of them probably is the fact that this is $1 million, and maybe a portion of that $1 million is going to be spent in St. Louis County. There's dollars that we don't have to come up with and find on our own and spend in order to be interoperable. Thank you.
All those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda, or next item on the agenda, is the Central Management and Intergovernmental Relations. Commissioner O'Neill, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Fink. We have one item. It is the proposed employment agreement for a new county administrator, and I would move it forward.
It's been moved and supported. Are there comments? Commissioner Racker.
Only me? Oh, I'll lead this off. And you won't be surprised at what I'm saying. As you may recall, last week in the committee whole, I recorded a no vote on this matter. And I articulated the reasons why I could not, with a clear conscience, endorse the negotiated offer that we had to offer Kevin Gray. In addition, I indicated I would likely, as a sign of solidarity, support the hiring of Kevin Gray at the board level where we are today. On this past week, I spoke with Kevin Gray to share with him my concerns and made a commitment to him to support his hiring with an asterisk, referencing the points I made last week in the Committee of the Whole. And he indicated that he understood my reasoning, and we both affirmed our commitment to work together for the betterment of our common constituents. And as I stated last week, Kevin Gray's success at St. Louis County is our collective success. I will be brief, and lastly, both he and I are excited about the future he has here in St. Louis County and the many challenges that we have on the horizon. And I will end with a quote from a famous statesman, Sir Winston Churchill, who said, "It is not enough we do our best sometimes. Not enough we do our best. Sometimes we have to do what is required." And what is required here today is that we send a message to Kevin Gray, to the taxpayers and constituents in St. Louis County, and to everyone throughout our organization that we are unanimous in our support of our choice here today after having been through a long process, a very comprehensive process, and I certainly will be supportive. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair Fink. I just wanted to add, I want to thank everyone who was involved in this process, the other good candidates that sought this job, and Martha Watson and her staff from Employee Relations, who I think really did an excellent job in leading us through a lengthy and very thorough process. So I thank them and look forward to Kevin working hard for us.
Commissioner Forsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of points to the recap for the public is that, in my opinion, and an opinion that I've heard from other board members, is that this particular time, as we went through this process, we ended up with 5 candidates. There were statements made that you could have put 5 candidates up on a dartboard, thrown the dart, and got a decent administrator. That is a nice spot to be as a board. I had 3 strong candidates. I think that showed up in my votes. And Kevin Gray wasn't my second candidate. He was my other candidate. I strongly supported Ron Dicklich as my primary candidate, but I liked Kevin Gray, and I'll just stop with one. I think during the whole process, I mentioned a number of people that I respect that knew Kevin Gray, that a couple unsolicited, a couple solicited. I got very positive responses on his abilities of people that knew him. But this last week in Ely, I got a very positive, my son's girlfriend's grandmother's husband, grandpa-in-law, had very positive comments on Kevin Gray, and he was his 6th grade teacher, so in Biwabik. So with that said, is that if he was good in 6th grade, he's probably okay now. So
Are there other comments? Commissioner O'Neill, you get the last word. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. That's the last item on our agenda. Thank you again for a good morning. There's been a motion to adjourn. Is there support? And it is supported. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. We will, let's see, is that 5 minutes? 5 till? How about 5 after? Can we get back to the boardroom in 5 minutes, or 10 minutes? Excellent. Thank you.